Navi Yirmiyahu says, Hinei koil Shavas Basami, the sound of the cries of my nation, Me Eretz Marchakim, from a distant land. From a distant land I hear the cries of my nation. What are the cries? Hashem ein b'Tzion? Is God not in Zion? In Malka ein ba? Is the king not there? When we cry out to Hashem, we're crying to Avinu Shabashamayim. We cry and we tell him what we feel. We cry out our anger. We cry out our confusion. How could such a thing happen? Medrash Eicha says, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yechorev Beis HaMikdash. May the Beis HaMikdash be destroyed, V'yal tiga yad b'tzadikim, but don't touch the tzadikim. Tzadikim are more cherished by HaKadosh Baruch Hu than the Beis HaMikdash. How could such a thing happen? How could such a thing happen in the Mikdash Ma'at? How could HaKadosh Baruch Hu take the best of us? Does it mean that now that there's no Beis HaMikdash, with animal karbanos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking tzaddikim for karbanos instead? And as we know from Hevel, if we're bringing a carbon, it's got to be the best. Is that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing? He is taking clearly what is the most cherished by him. They were davening. Tefillah didn't work. They were wearing tefillin. V'ro kolam me'ores ki shem Hashem nikra alecha v'yoru mimeka. These were tzaddikim mamish. How are we to understand this? We can't. Or we could cry out and say we don't understand it. We have to. Menachem mentioned Chazal that Misas Tzadikim is Mechaperes. That the death of Tzadikim is a kapara, is an atonement for the generation. So the Torah Temima by the Chazal in Parshas Chukas, because it's by Misas Miriam, Loma Nismacha Misas Miriam, the Parshas Paraduma, he explores what does this mean that the Misa of Tzadikim is Mechaper. And he says it may not mean the Misa, the Petira itself of the Tzadikim, but he brings rayas that it means the Hespedim that we make for the Tzadikim. The kapara that we get from Misa Tzadikim only comes once we're maspid to the tzaddikim karoi, and once we express our appreciation for who they were, and once we recognize the tremendous loss that we have. That is the kapara. I found a Sefer HaZikaron with a compilation of Hespedim that were given in 1930. 1 year after the massacre in Hebron in 1929. Yeshivas Slabotka, Yeshivas Hebron, where 24 Talmidim of the yeshiva were slaughtered by Arabs. Over 60 people altogether, Jews in the city, besides wounded, were brutally murdered and mutilated. And I read the hespedim that were given at the yard site by the Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Mordechai Epstein, who miraculously survived. He was there at the time. I read the hesped given by Rabbi Cheskel Sarna, Rabbi Moshe Mordechai's son-in-law, future Rosh Hashiva, the Yeshiva in Hebron. And I saw the appreciation. The focus of the hespedim was not so much the crying, yes, it was a year later, it was a yard site, but it was an appreciation of what was. It was beautiful description in the most beautiful Hebrew, written by Talmidim, the most beautiful description of what life was like in the yeshiva in Slobodka in Hebron before it was so brutally destroyed by the enemy, who couldn't stand that such beauty in their midst. A description of the young Talmidei Chachamim, giving up the comforts and the pleasures of home, learning Musar, the way they davened and the way they learned, with such a refinement and refining their personalities and refining their characters and becoming closer to Hashem. And this was the Ruach there in Hebron. There were no pizza shops there and there were no Rebbe's Tishim to distract. They were learning Yom V'Layla, becoming closer and closer to Hashem. And then there's a poignant description of the American Talmidim who were learning in Hebron at the time. And a poignant statement of the disproportionate amount of American Talmidim who were slaughtered during the massacre in Hebron. Much more than their percentage in the yeshiva. Fact. But there was a description of something we know and something we sense. And it was amazing that I saw it in the writings in the 1930s. The special charm and refreshing quality of the American Ben Torah that was recognized by Rav Chaskel Sarna, Rav Moshe Mordechai Epstein, and that we see today. Very special quality of a combination of humility, normalcy, MS, no shtick. Tonight, as we come to express our horror, Le'avinu Shabashamayim, at what happened, to express our confusion, we're here also to appreciate. Rabbi Kalman Levine, Zechroni Levracha, Hashem Yinkaim Damai, is our product. Rabbi Tzvi Block got the ball rolling, and Kalman came to the yeshiva, and I'm looking around, and the Chaverim, Chavera Yoser Mehem, people learn from the Chaverim more than they learn from the Rabbein. And this special person, we saw how special he was then. We saw the Geschmackheit of tremendous hasmada in learning, a tremendous simchas chaim. I'll never forget one Purim. I think it was a David Jacobson, put on a synchronized shuckling competition, which was amazing. I still remember exactly what they were doing. Geschmack, a person with tremendous hasmada. We saw a budding Talmid Chacham, and we didn't maintain such a close kesher over the years. And now we heard what happened to the seed that we planted. We heard how he became literally a gadol b'Torah. We heard how he lived his life with his wife and family. The description was similar. I'm reading the description of his day and how he lived his life, and it was similar to the descriptions that I was reading at the Hespedim in the 1930, of how he woke up every day at Nates to daven, and how he was kulo shukua in learning, and now he was mashpia on younger talmidim, and he was a sholem meshiv in this kailan, and he was a mashpia here. And when you hear the influence he had on others, you knew that as he was growing in Torah, and as he, I am sure, jumped ahead of his Rabbeim in his knowledge of Torah with the amount of immersion that he had and that was steeped in his learning, he retained his normalcy and he retained his simchas achayim, which is what enabled him to have such a strong influence on others. And the testimonies that we read and we hear from his Talmidim, we have to appreciate who he was. We have to mourn his tzidkis. He never said a word of Lashon Hara. The pasuk in Eicha says, Bila Hashem v'loi chomal. Hashem swallowed up and had no mercy. Es kol na'is Yaakov. All the places of Yaakov. And the Medrash Eicha says, it's Bila Hashem v'loi chomal, es kol na'is Yaakov. Is a reference to 480 Batei Knesios in Yerushalayim that were destroyed at the time. And the Gemara says the Rabbi Yochanan darshan this pasuk of Bila Hashem v'lo chomal, that Hashem swallowed up and had no compassion. Seemingly, the act seemed not to have compassion. And he darshaned it b'shishin anpin, 60 different ways. He analyzed and elaborated on this pasuk. And then the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi elaborated on this pasuk 24 different ways, not 60. Zok the Medrash, don't think that it's because Rabbi Yochanan was greater than Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi that he was able to make commentaries on this pasuk more than twice as much as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. But no, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, even though he was not alive at the time of the destruction of the Bayis Sheni, was closer to the time of the Bayis Sheni. So since he was closer to the time of the Bayis Sheni, Nizkar, he would remember. V'hayadoresh, he would analyze the pasuk, uvoche, and he would cry, umisnachem, and he would be consoled. And if you look at the Mefarshei Medrash, everybody has a different approach in trying to explain this cryptic message. What I would glean from Rav Chaskel Sarner Zechon Levracha's Hesped, just based on it, he doesn't say this. But what I would glean is the way Rav Chaskel Sarner understood this Medrash. Why did Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi only darshan 24 times in contrast to Rabbi Yochanan 60? Because Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was closer to the time of the destruction. So he heard all the beautiful tales of the wanderer of the Beis HaMikdash. He heard the tremendous Kedusha of the Kohanim. He heard about the Levium Symphonic Orchestra. He heard of the state of Klal Yisrael at the time. So he could not be in total mourning. Hayadoresh, he darshan uvach, and he cried, because we cry in our loss. But he was close enough to remember what he heard from people who saw, people who heard the symphony orchestra, people who saw the Avodah, the Beis HaMikdash, umisnachem. He said, wow, that beauty, that Kedusha, that Torah, we had it. And we're going to have it again. When we come together here tonight to be bocher, to be doresh uvocher, to cry and to mourn on the tremendous loss and the tremendous pain that we're all feeling, we have to also smile at the image of our own Kalman Levine with synchronized shuckling on Purim. The image of him being Mesameach Chasen V'Kala, the image of him sitting in the corner of this base medrash, plugging away Yom V'Layla, first one in and last one out. And imagine, as we see the pictures and the photographs, of how he developed into an Ish Tzaddik, an Ish Tamim, and a Gadol B'Torah, and have Nechama, have consolation that we played even a small role in planting the seed that turned into this tremendous greatness. if we are going to understand that Misas Tzadikim are mechaper because they are korbanos, the Ramban explains how korbanos work. The Ramban explains how a korban is a kapara. That when a person brings a korban, and the korban is shechted, and the blood is placed on the mizbeach, a person is supposed to think that really should be me. And I'm bringing this korban in my stead. If we are going to look at the Misas Tzadikim as korbanos, then their almanos and their yisaimim are not theirs, they are our almanos and our yisaimim. That's what a korban means. Should be me. He says instead of me, it's Chaya Levine is our almana. The yisaimim are our yisaimim. At the end, Rabbi Sauer is going to, Nishikayach to him for doing the work, he's going to tell people how they could donate to help. I'm sure people will come over to Rabbanim and ask, how much should I give? I'm going to be blunt. You have to give enough that you feel it. Very often, when we decide how much tzedakah to give, what could I afford to give that I won't feel as a loss? I have money set aside for most meiser. Okay, instead of giving it to here, I'm going to give it there. No, that's not enough. I can't tell you how much, but I can tell you it's got to be enough that you feel it. It will make a difference. You'll have something less for yourselves. They are our almanos. They are our yisaimim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be merachem al sheres amei beis Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring the geula, and he should open our eyes that we should see the Yeshuas Hashem keheref ayin, so we can scream Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim.
Rabbi Sholom, I'd like to call on the Tzvi Block, who, as Rabbi Sholom so aptly put it, got the ball rolling with Kalman and really started him on his journey in life to live a life of Torah and to become what he did become.